Well, mahalo Karen and mahalo everyone for letting me come back to my beloved alma mater and just share a little bit. I have some stuff that I wanted to show you guys around the presentation that we've been doing, talking about the role of planners in our communities. But I wanted to also show this documentary that a real quick snippet of this documentary that Uncle Pui Pao, who just in Hala, did about 30 years ago on this idea of food security or self-sufficiency in Hawaii. And I just saw it the other day and I was just really moved by it for several reasons. But also to kind of give some context to what I hope to talk about and to show the continuity that we're just nothing but pieces of backbone of how nothing we did is about ourselves as much as through us, and how do we see all of our work as a perpetuation of all the work that's come before us. So I'm going to show this quick piece. It's super awesome because it's done in 1987 and it looks like it. And see, we're working on getting a sound together so this works well. This in progress, but this was designed to be a resource for teachers in DOE that played on PBS. The Uncle Sam is talking.
Today we have everyone saying Aloha Aina. Aina means a place to eat. Aina, eat. It doesn't mean land. Land is referred to, if you are Kalo people looking, is a nu, meaning elevated. When you get on top of the land, they call it mo, and the great land districts are called. But Aina is a very special term. It's a place where water and deep soil mix, and you can grow kalo. You can plant the huala. You can plant the maya. It is only feeding land. It is not the top of a mountain or the rocks, where it's lots of lava flow. It is a place with soil. We tell you this because today much feeding land is being paved over. And if you think like an island person, it is important that you remember what the land was used for. And we are talking about a place with running water and deep soil, suited for to eat. Michael?
You go down to the supermarket and you look at your meats and your oranges, and you see some of it is local grown, but a lot of it comes from the outside. So us in Hawaii are very dependent on outside food sources. But that doesn't have to be. In Hawaii, we're blessed by a beautiful climate. We have enough rainfall in certain parts of the island. So we have to think about these things in terms of what we call self-sufficiency. When we talk about self-sufficiency in Hawaii, we're talking about raising our own food and depending on our own selves so that we can support our own selves and support our own family. And these are things that we have to become aware of because it's going to affect our children in the future.
You're super true.
At one time, Hawaii was a
I used that was my dad, and I was at all the farms, and that was me and all of us knowing that we're gonna get our asses teased off when people see this. Yeah, there's a story. Me and my brother are gonna hold signs like "Save us." Put dirt on our face. But I wanted to show that so much of what we're talking about now, especially for those of you who are just starting college, this is a continuity. This is stuff that's been going on for a long time. And we'll share the link to that video because it's super awesome. And it was prescient. It was 30 years ago. They're talking about, it was called For All Our Holes, like a look into the future. And it's like really, really, really clear that they saw this coming. And my presentation hopefully was like, as that kid that was carrying a kalo with his dad that was all organizing and making us farm, being a second generation activist, what was my kuleana to pick up that work? Because at that time, if you'd asked me then what I wanted to be doing in my life wasn't that. It was probably doing something far away from that, but I grew into it. And the challenge was like, how do and I recognized the benefits I accrued from being that kid and opportunities provided me relative to my peers. And my job was like, what am I going to do to make my experience something that is normalized, that more people have access to, not just myself. So kind of what I wanted to give as a starting point for this arc of really what do I do now as a planner, but more importantly, why am I a planner? When there are many things in my life I could have been, and what's the role, the emerging role of planning? I think that's a really big part of our conversations. And my presentation is kind of like, try to run through it so that we have conversations after, because I hate like talking at people. It really breathes into my political side and gotta learn this economy. My word, it's the sharing economy. But there are things I want to impart. And a lot of it's going to be pictures from my younger brother, Hawaiian Studies, and he does some work that I incorporate as well. So what I learned though with my dad was really about islands, and islands relative to how people lived on islands for generations and were able to bequeath wealth. And Puna, we learned from our ancestors, weren't superhuman. They were people that were taught by islands and had to understand carrying capacities. And islands teach deep relationship and interconnectivity. It teaches symbiosis. You can't live on an island and not be symbiotic. You can, but you can't. You have to learn how to shape whole society to understand your carrying capacity and how you relate with others. So like some of the pictures my brother drew really captured that, really succinctly painted captured that. Like one of them he did was it sets the context, and these are for those of you who don't know pohaku ku'iai. They call it poi pounders, but the uncles I know would slap my head if I called it a poi pounder, because poi was when you was done, pa'iai was what you made. And in this, he painted all these different pohaku ku'iai, but they have the valley walls. And this idea that our ancestral industries were inherently green. Our ancestral industries of growing kalo or raising fish or whatever fit within the ecology of our valleys. They didn't disrupt them. They blended into them. So they were seamlessly a part of the world around them. There wasn't this false binary of jobs versus environment. They were together, and the growth of your environment meant better opportunities for you. So that was a big take home I got from being forced to raise taro. The other was you were related to the landscape. There was a really profound ancestral principle that the land is a sentient ancestor. The land is watching you, and it's your ancestor. The land is related to you. And that deep and profound learning that I got from watching my father do the work, but more importantly by the uncles that came and helped my dad and taught us these things in the space of a valley, shaped me incredibly. But I think there was always a schizophrenia of like, yeah, I'll do that up on the mountains, but back down when I come hang with my boys. I don't know if you can see this very well. That says die. So if you open up Waianae High School, I dropped out of high school, so if you open up Waianae High School Class of 91 annual, and you look in the back, right, I just happened to be showing up because lunch was 50 cents back then. And I've seen everybody walking to the stadium with their signs, like, where you guys going? I was like, brah, it was like, it's class picture. I was like, oh, nerds. So I sat there, and I was watching everybody hold up their signs, so-and-so loves so-and-so, number 52. I had a piece of paper in my back pocket, and I was so disenfranchised by the disconnect of what I saw up in the valley versus what I was being taught in my high school. Like, Waianae High School back then, brilliant teachers, wonderful folks, some of them, but it was a dropout factory that assumed we're a bunch of dumb Hawaiians. And like, if you're lucky, you get out and you leave. Go military. If you're unlucky, go work Campbell Industrial Park and make $14 for the rest of your life, making someone else rich. And my thing was like, that's not going to be me. But I didn't have any recourse to do anything about it because I was so like trying to figure it out. So I just wrote on a piece of paper, die, and they took a picture of it. And it's there for all to see. I'm making like full disclosure thing. And this is the early one. There are later ones where they actually blacked it out. But it's funny, but it's not, because my experience wasn't just limited to me. And I recognize that I was a face of privilege. because in my community, I had families that was activists, and my grandparents had bought land. And they're blue collar, but they had an asset, and my father was a college-educated Hawaiian still, who worked in community. So all of these different opportunities that I didn't know how to make use of. And my peers and friends weren't having it. So I was lucky if I was sober if I took this picture. But the capturing of it was the reality of this. Like this disconnect that happened to our people. The external part of us that we've had to adapt to a society as of second-class citizens and how that manifested itself in our behavior. And it left me really angry. So after I dropped out of high school, I did the real important step of getting a minimum wage job. And that was critical. That's why I'm here today. Don't want to do that for the rest of my life. And I recognized that I need to be doing something. And luckily, I had an opportunity to apply for UWNL. It's a University of Hawaiian alumnus. There's a LCC satellite. I went to classes there, and it was a real powerful experience because then I began to understand, this is a pathway not out of my community, but reconciling what I was learning from my father and the traditions of our ancestors with this system that is thrust upon us, that's forcing us into second-class citizens, as second-class citizens in our own homeland. And that was a path that brought me to Manoa. And I don't know if you've ever, Uncle can probably attest, this is like, Waianae is its own neighbor island. It's like you can basically find not driving past Pearl City and just stay there our whole lives. And the idea of making that leap to come here was really big. But, at that time we had Hawaiian Studies. And my father said, you should go. Even though my father and Hawaiian Studies had hakaka back then about building of the lo'i over lo'i down there, they still told me to go because it's something to learn. So moving to Hawaiian Studies, moving to town and then going to Hawaiian Studies was a powerful part of what it meant to grow up. Like as a Waianae boy, I had no friends in college, no one knew what the hell I was talking about when I was taking classes, and they're like, okay, whatever, but anyway, what do you think about the game? And so I was trying to reconcile all those things, and then move to Manoa was even more worse. Like moving to town was like, wow, Manoa is like so different than Waianae. So many guys don't party at 3 in the morning on a Wednesdays. What are you guys getting mad at me for? But luckily, I moved into Hawaiian Studies and I got some mentors. I'm sorry the quality isn't that good, kalamai. But once I got there, it became the first point in my life where things started making sense. The ability to understand what my dad was doing, who was kind of doing it intuitively and he was doing it on his own without a structure, but he just had to have it done. There was structure to it. And some of my early mentors was Kumujano Sorio, who's still there. And part of what he really provided me in when you come and start learning indigenous studies, if you come from those communities, you're going to learn things that piss you off real fast. And you're going to be like, screw everybody. You guys did this to us. And the first recourse is, you're lucky we're just chanting at you. We could be doing other things. But he was a force within that allowed us to be devil's advocate. It's like, we shouldn't be indoctrinating you. You should be taking these things not on face value. You should test them out. Take the opposing view. Understand there's different ways to look at this. So you're not just becoming a fanatic. That you're understanding there's nuance to these conversations. There's complexities. People aren't enemies because they're bad. They have their own worldview. You have to understand them. On the other end of the spectrum was Hale Aloha Ayao. My roommate, and he was a lawyer. And he was the head lawyer that was in charge of ensuring that Native Hawaiian remains are returned from federal museums. And he went to prison, sticking to his guns. This is him staring down somebody in court and refusing to do anything, but still continuing to work out of prison computers on his work. So he taught me tenacity. This is what it means to do this work. This isn't just protesting 6 hours and going home. This is a life. And that was a real powerful kind of counterpoint. That you have to be flexible, but you have to be tenacious. And the third was Lily Kala, and especially her book, Native Land and Foreign Desires, which provided a real powerful framework to understand ancestral practice and ancestral structures. And how were our ahupua'as went? What was the internal systems of managing people and managing land together, and how is that part of a hierarchy, which is a comprehensive system that helped me understand my ancestry better. Not just from who I am as a poor Hawaiian from Waianae with an activist dad, but who my ancestors were, and how they managed land in a way that allowed it to perpetuate abundance for hundreds of years without any imports. And that was a really powerful space to be pulling all these things together. Sadly, I had to graduate from Hawaiian Studies. Oh man, like I got to get my BA and I got to do something. And the question like, bro, is you gonna do with a BA in Hawaiian Studies? I work here, so I didn't feel like working law. So I luckily was going to go into law until I saw what it meant to be a lawyer. Look at that. I don't have that type of like burning like desire to be in people's face all the time, which is necessary. I mean, it's advocacy. And I remember reading Art of War from Sun Tzu at that point. And there was a story of the three brothers who were physicians. And this great physician is known throughout all the land as the most powerful physician, was brought to the emperor's court. I'm totally paraphrasing it, so, I bet you. But what I remember from it, the emperor said, "You surely must be the best physician in all the land," because everyone knows about it. He says, "No, I have two older brothers that are their skill far exceeds mine." Really? He said, the middle brother, the one above me, has the ability to see great illness only when it manifests itself in the early stages. So his fame doesn't exceed his village. My eldest brother sees the spread of sickness before it enters the village, so no one knows who he is. I can only fix things when they're at their worst, so therefore I'm famous. And that really drove me to think about planning. It's this idea of going upstream and fixing the causal problems versus waiting for them to be in your face, shit hit the fan moment. And how do you learn that skill set though, because it's a very different skill set. At that same time, my dad said, if you're thinking about graduate school, why don't you think about the planning department? I work a lot with a lot of professors there. And they're doing great work in community. Karen, Dolores, Kem, Lucio, we're all doing work in Waianae. I said, okay. So I put in an application, which I think, wow, I was pretty focused back then. Probably comes from being compulsive, having a compulsive disorder, not stop thinking about things. And I went to the planning department, and really quickly early on, when I entered the planning department, the shift was fundamental. Because I went from identity study, political studies, something like the point of the spear, like we'll get in the front line and get in people's faces, to being a planner. And what I learned very quickly was planning was not about you. Planning was about who you served, who's the community, and how are you a conduit to helping them manifest their hopes. It's like going on the freeway and turning in reverse. Especially when you have an unfortunate inclination to suck up all the scenery around you talk. Like, to learn the skills of a planner was a powerful one. And where it came to bear though was like, I was super lucky to take this class. 2004, it was the Plan 618, Community Economic Development, and really to be mentored by Karen and Bob Agris. Continues to be, and they both continue to be mentors who were incredibly influential. And why this was an important class for me was my father's work went from resistance, and they occupied Taro Farm in the 70s and fought the state. But they soon recognized that they were trying to stop development, but development provided jobs. So they were beefing their own communities about, why are you doing that wine stuff? You got jobs. Why are you trying to stop us building golf courses? We need the jobs. Taro Farm will feed people. And they soon recognized that we need to start understanding how we're creating jobs. And how are we creating jobs in a way that reflect our ancestry, the community owns, and that are jobs that don't externalize their costs by creating pollution or exploiting people. How do we do that? And that had been a long conversation that Bob early on tried to help my dad with this organization called HACVED, eventually Hawaii Alliance for Community-Based Economic Development. Have a quote here every day. The class was really the conversations that not just practitioners like my father, but other practitioners across the state were having about how do we hold ground in the community and not be pushed off by outside forces by creating jobs that reflect our community value, our environment, and our ancestry. So it was the dream, it was like the dream class. What was really awesome about it was I got to actually do a project on my dad's organization, which was super gangster. Like super meta, it's like Darth Vader kind of stuff. Doing a project on your father's organization as they wrestled with how do we sustain a kalo farm? How do you do it in a way that generates revenue? And the conversation came around like, how do we do it as a form of ecotourism? And what's really hard about that word is like, back in the day, tourism was a four-letter word. It was the forces that were pushing us off our land or misrepresenting our people, and now you want to make money off of it. But they're desperate to try to find a way to support the nonprofit to keep it going. So I had to jump in and facilitate meetings that Karen and Bob oversaw with the organization to figure out how do we talk about, how do we have this conversation. And then that's where I really learned the core skills of planning. The planning process that we were taught was how to facilitate dialogue, how to hold multiple ideas and multiple values up alongside each other in a way that they're respectful of differences but trying to find solutions. And how do you get, what's the role in serving that conversation, the specifics of it. And it was a powerful opportunity for me to begin the first attempt of the work that I think we're continuing to do now. Is how do we bring ancestral traditions to be brought to bear in contemporary spaces that create solutions. So the upshot of it was we talked about not calling it tourism, but calling it political tourism. And it allowed me to leverage the first time what I learned in Hawaiian Studies with planning. I just did all my research on how our ancestors navigated. 4 stories of great navigators at Keha, Kerenui, Ku'u. They were tourists. They went from place to place, but there were protocols attached to their visiting, and there was a purpose to it to build alliances that got people together. And so if that's what the farm is doing, we can use that model to think about who's the right people to bring here that can provide the proper type of resources to underwrite the work. We're not opening it to somebody who's going to put a cigarette out and you have to crack out in the parking lot. They created that framework to understand bringing this to bear in a contemporary space. And that was when we first began the real job of deconstructing what are the systems around us. But it quickly taught me you can't just deconstruct. If you're construction, you either break down, building a house up is another thing. You gotta learn a diagnosis isn't a cure. What is the cure? What is going to replace what you don't like comprehensively? So we started looking at deconstructing what is a tourist model, where our culture is appropriated, our people are being paid crap, but it's going upstream. The money is leaving out of our communities and someone's getting richer off of our back. To like how their ancestors run their economic principles and how they think about doing that. So that was a segue to like what I eventually ended up doing my master's thesis on. Talking about now. But trying to create an aina-based sustainability model. Because what we started hearing over and over and over again was sustainability. And folks was talking about it like it was new and it was invented in the 60s. But the point being, first is mad, then do something. So in essence, what the planning department allowed me to be able to do to leverage all the things that I've learned up was to have a space to look at the discussion and mentoring to help me unpack it and make it tight. And allowed me to then go and I did the mo'okuaho, the genealogy of the word sustainability, all the way back to its spiritual roots in the Old Testament, and where it came to life in the 1900s and 1960s with the environmental movement and sustainable development in the 1970s, 80s, and now. And also the mo'okuaho of our ancestral land use tenure. And so where that came from, its spiritual purpose, spiritual rootedness, and how it was used to actually create a whole society that was based off of ensuring that your land and natural resources are perpetuated alongside people, and put them together in a structure that can be deployed to shift policy and create jobs, and create programs. And that was a big aha moment that you can do all of these things. Discipline is necessary. So some of the things that I don't want to talk at you in technical terms, but this is just to prove that I went to college. Dichotomy, grad student words. But like, what it allowed me to understand was that contemporary systems are anthropocentric, which are man-centered, which doesn't see land as intrinsically having value outside of its use for man, versus ancestral systems are biocentric, which understood that you existed within a web of life, and it's rooted in how spiritual directives were interpreted. Western land use law is from Old Testament. You have dominion of the landscape. Ancestral is from Kumulipo. You are the youngest sibling on the landscape. And if you're the youngest in a Polynesian family, you know what that means. You ain't calling no shots. You listening. And in listening, you get fed. And that is the elegance of how to understand ecology. How to understand the realities. Like, you only think you're the top of the apex predator until everyone disappears and you're dead. Then you've eaten everything in your refrigerator and you blew your whole bank account. You're broke now. We can't get there yet. So this gave me that point to actually engage, to look at some of the critical things that are then structurally keeping that system in place. So like where we are now. But the most important part, because I'm sick and tired of the sad sob story, is what we're going to do about it. And to reframe a new sustainability paradigm that aligns with what people are talking about, triple bottom line economies, to say, look, the valley I was raised in, 200 acres low ecology. Versus was much being produced today. On today's market, in 1777, they're doing millions of dollars. What they're doing without diminishing natural capital or human systems. They're doing triple bottom line economy stuff for generations. It's our job to talk about it, right? What are we going to do to make sure that we're perpetuating it and understanding the systems around us, how to talk to them about the value of our ancestry so they support us. So, island-based sustainability came out of it. The fourth thing is sustainability, if you really want it to be sustainable, is people have the political rights to land, you sustain natural living systems, you sustain the human populations, and you sustain the knowledge system, but the practices that keep them intact, and they're all four equal legs, not one at the expense of the other. And that's basically our ancestral, that's our ancestors maintain their governance, all the different pieces of it. You can read the dissertation, I don't want to blah it too much, but this is kind of the culmination of what I got from grad school. But then you gotta go work. They hit that planning like, wow, I'm gonna go work. You go work at the state, you go work the private sector. How does that really play itself out? And I was in that wrestling match. And I started recognizing what we did have, though I learned there is like, and if you refer to the picture back, what I was bringing to the table not in terms of profession, but skill sets, was the ability to help translate the responsibility. Because like all of this side of the Hawaiians is held in English. Because we're talking about ancestry in the wrong language. So we need rights, we need money, we need religion. We have to talk about religion not as a spiritual thing, but as a system that you force others to conform to. So in all these different types of places where hot springs of like discontent, to actually talking about it from our language. You can't talk about rights. You can't talk about responsibilities. You don't have a right to something that you haven't shown a responsibility to. They'll kill you if you try to take something you haven't done work for. You can't talk about money. We talked about water. We didn't have GDPs. The actual currency of the land was the fitness of the people and the flow of the water. And that's what got translated into English. Hawaiian was money became water. We didn't talk about anything outside of the relationship of family and land. That's when we talked about religion, that's when we talked about... We had no word for religion, we had no word for environment. That's where the idea that you could do something that wasn't spiritual, that you could do something outside of the environment, was bananas. What do you think you're going to do? Like, you think you don't impact things around you? You think there's a spiritual component to everything you do? You force that in, like, those two terms fit into the word Aina and Ohana, family and what feeds us. And the most important distinction for me in trying to move forward to figure out what post-planning look like was the word mauli. The word Hawaiian is in our word. That's Hawaiian, we don't have an first original. And then if that's who you are, you have responsibility. It's not a privilege to be the oldest, it's a responsibility. And I knew that I had to go forth armed with these things to figure out what my responsibility was. And the biggest thing I realized too is that you couldn't translate what everybody used to call my dad, Hawaiian rights activist, into Hawaiian. There was no word for Hawaiians, there was no word for right and no word for activists. When you translated Hawaiian rights activist into Hawaiian, you got, and I'm super sorry if you speak Hawaiian. I spoke 3 years of class 15 years ago, but he kanaka e ho'okule ana mauli, a person that restores ancestral responsibilities. So if you take the activist approach, it's very myopic and adversarial, versus You restore responsibilities of what people did here in the past. You understand how do you live in your landscape. And you get people back to do that again as the work. Then it becomes plannerly. And luckily, I was able to find a job out at my organic farms, and they hired me back into my own community. And a quick context, if you don't know what Ma'o is, I went back as a radical planner and had a good conversation with Karen, because that's when that term popped into my head. It's like I didn't want to work for the state, capital letter or lowercase. And I didn't want to work for the private sector, because those are both working for where power, you're actually at the end of the day perpetuating the structures. And when I learned about radical planning, I didn't think of it as like radical like bandana Molotov. Maybe not that deep. Because I see that ultimately after you burn things down, you got to build them up. I thought about the other side, like radical from the radius. Like planning not from the center point of where power is structured, but planning where we want power to move to. And what are the skill sets necessary to bring them there. So luckily, we found a happy marriage, like that peanut butter and chocolate commercial. They were looking for someone to come back and pick up a position to help them expand their work, and I was looking for a way to get back into my community, as I guess I must have said in my mission statement. And so the skill sets, I think, of a radical planner, or as Karen wants me to call it, a transformative planner. The first one is I call it, what they do sometimes, at least for Maoli, is do a triple pico analysis. So I something a term I came up with. Your picos are your different connections. Your fontanelle connects you to your ancestors. Your navel connects you to this. And your reproductive organs connect you to the future. So in analyzing our programs from the planning perspective in community attached to a nonprofit, the first question, like, how does our work align with the ancestral principle? What is what we're doing part of what our people did in ways that allow them to be self-sufficient? The second question we ask is, how is this work then from ancestry empowering contemporary generations? Specifically, all of these need metrics. They can't just be qualitative. It makes me feel good. I go to sleep at night. What's the metrics of money that you're putting in this that's backing you up when you go to bed? And the second is like contemporary generations are now empowered because of the ancestral practice. But the most important people, the future is like what basis of kofua is for future generations, for them to be abundant. And if it's not doing this, everything else fails because you're just doing it. You're just doing it for your generation. And you know what happens when that happens. It's kind of what's happening now. Another term that I think is really important, I started to use and to help think through, is this idea of kahiko and awana. So those of you who dance hula, kahiko was the ancestral type of hula that carried the traditions down, that you had a clear, almost unbroken lineage to the physical nature of ancestors, the language, that's all we understood, our landscape. It's all coded to understand your geography now. Lived in there. Awana was how it happened. What happened when hula kahiko meant ballroom dancing and the monarchy, and they had to take on the trappings of power, the new system, but still stay true to who we were. So I would understand then my work with Ala as having had been working in a mala kahiko. Like this was a space where it wasn't just farming. There's a great term I've heard before, is like from Hawaiian language speakers, is pua doesn't mean flower. You can't talk about one thing in another language and have it mean the same thing. They come from completely different epistemologies. Mahi'ai didn't mean farmer. Mahi meant there were people that weren't just growing food. There were systems thinkers, there were hydrologists, there were community organizers, there were spiritual practitioners. How do we understand the fullness of what our ancestral practice was and use power Western terms to describe them and then bring that into contemporary practice? And when we started understanding, I started thinking of Ala as Malakahiko, then we started thinking about it as a repository for ancestral biocentric sciences, technologies, and spirituality. And intact spaces where I got a chance to walk with my ancestors and understand practice from their perspective, not from a book, from doing it, and from understanding how do you get the water to flow, how do you get people to work. Those same realities that your ancestors had to figure out, you get a chance to practice. And then move it into Mala'awana, to what we do at Maui. So now we're an organic farm, there's 24 acres, largest organic farm in Oahu. the basic operations of the program, though, we send kids to college from Waianae, they put in 20 hours a week on a farm in exchange for giving them full tuition to go to college. A starting monthly stipend of $500 and open a bank account. So we're sending about 35 kids from Waianae to college, and they now run daily operations of the farm, so I can be here running my mouth. And that's the power of like deploying ancestral principles in a contemporary context, because we do it as a nonprofit, so no one's getting rich. We're all getting living wage. We're all getting living wage. We can find ways to make living wages out of this, but no one is being the beneficiary of everyone's work. It's collectively put out there. And that's kind of like that arc then is preparing to kind of think about how we structure our models and calling it something. So really quickly, not being too talky, but the way we then structured this is a culmination of all the different practices is in our social enterprise model, where there's two revenue streams of our program now. The social grants that we write for the scholarships, and then the revenue earned income we get from generating our own product. And this comes through the different layers of people looking at decisions, our board and elders okaying it, the program directors implementing it, but the agents of change, the drivers in this movement are the youth. They are empowered by the mission by getting their GPAs, and they report back upstream that they're doing good, we grab while empowering the organization by making money. And the money they know goes right back into the program, not into my pocket. I'll show you my truck out in the back. It will go back into the organization to keep it running, and they become just like that little maid I was pulling kalo stuff. Like I get a chance to think about how I replicate my experience for a bigger group, for my friends' kids now. My friends keep their jobs, whatever. They can send their kids to a program and we try to give that opportunity for them, their kids to participate. But what I think is also important is these engines keep the organization going, but what actually the long-term benefit is the community. We start saying over time, what's the implication of more kids from our community going to college? What's the implication of more food being grown and distributed back into our community to displace the secular elements and all the health disparity issues we get? What's the implication of millions of dollars coming into our local economy being reinvested in our people? And now when they want to put a dump in our community, we just tell them, yeah, they expect us to get there, show up, yell at them for 20 minutes, or 2 minutes, but keep yelling at them after telling us we need to sit down and then go back. It's like living next to the freeway, though. If you live next to the freeway, I feel like you stop hearing it now. So whatever. We can go there with, like, what's your 20-year projection on that parcel? Because here's our overview. In this 20 years, this is how much we're going to be making, this is how much students we're going to be sending to college, and this is how much food we're going to be producing. So how is that dump going to benefit our community? And when you do that to them, they're like, well, just because you're poor in your Waianae, you don't want to put it in Waikai. You shouldn't go anywhere. We should be thinking about recycling and reusing. But at the very least, you get a chance to be like, no. But these are direct skill sets you learn from being a planner, from being a Hawaiian Studies student, and from coming from community, I think are really applicable to where the state needs to be, because I think there's people in leadership now that in the old days that have been killed because they're not really tied to real practice, and they're not really held accountable to the decisions other than not getting elected again. And I think that type of dynamic, we need to find subversive ways. Yeah, planning is super subversive. It shouldn't be fun. Some of the terms we can come up with, and I've said this before. You've heard me talk before. I apologize, but I've actually had to do this talk before. But we've got to create new lexicons that meld our two words together, because we can't talk about their stuff in our language and we can't talk about our stuff in their language. We've got to create this hyphen. One of the things I came up with was economics. We were saying, but we have an economic model. Our economic model was super profound, and our program is based off our ancestral economic model. The makahiki ceremony that we do every day, who went to Diui Hoi School? The makahiki games. Is it about having food and rolling into maikaya? Actually, there's this makahiki ceremony where they would get people to come. The chief would go to each valley and they would see, okay, people would do games and they'd feed them. And they go, oh, it's just a fun and festive time. There's actually a year in reporting to your chief. We had a non-monetary economy, and the capital of the chief was the fitness of the land and abundance of the people. And you'd see how much food that community could produce on demand and how fit the people were. You renewed your contract and got it going to next year. Those two metrics are the metrics we use in our program, sales and GPAs. The fitness of the people is the GPAs. The fitness of the land is the amount of product you're selling in a way that sees organic farming is actually caring for soil. And that's how we kind of talk about our economics model, because it helps them understand us better and gives us more agency. And the second one is academics. Talk about kids from Hawaiian is dumb. It's like, you're not dumb, we're smart enough now going to your school. Your school is dumb. Your school is judging us on things like my daughter came and was like, yeah, what's a squirrel? And it's like these types of really weird conversations we get from a standardized education, that if there's a curve, we're not in that curve. We're standardized to someone else's reality. And of course it looks stupid. To say our ancestry, we have really powerful form of education because we're self-sufficient in our own valley. And we went from prenatal to post-employment in our own valley, where your family member was A, your educator, B, your employer, and C, your spiritual leader. And the type of education we had was tied to a practice that was place-based. All these power terms, using not here for the UE grant, place-based, collective impact, all these different things, was the type of education system that we had pre-contact. Now how do we then redevelop that in our community that creates kids that are both fluent in academic structures but also practice? It honors kids that like working with their hands as much as they can, they learn how to take a test. And they're both seen as important values and dual fluencies that you get when you get kids to work on a farm and go to college. Like, how do we build that back into our structures so that we're getting better graduation rates for our students? We're starting to graduate kids from Hawaiian College. This is Leeward Community College, and what I love about our students is that they get to graduate with their work boots. And to me, that's the badge of honor, because you have a diploma, they get mud on their boots. And Uncle's has been out at Leeward helping our students too. And I think part of what happens when this change goes in our community, if you graduate from college, it's not just you that graduates, your family has an early goer. Then you create a new norm in your family that people then start to see pathways in. And it's, for us, what I love about Hawaiian thinking, it's not just a pathway out of your community, it's a pathway back into your community, so that you can be helping to serve what needs to be done there. And they're gaining that type of agency. And we just now created a Bachelor of Applied Science at University of Hawaii West Oahu in Sustainable Community Food Systems that we're going to be talking about next 2 weeks now at Harvard, because it's an early going model of indigenous thinking meeting contemporary agroecologic principles that we brought a Berkeley professor to move his whole family down to teach. And the main beneficiaries are going to be students from Waianae, where they're going to be learning an ancestral principle of like how to be a radical planner. How to A, know practice, because you've got a farm in a degree, but B, learn about the environmental, economic, and political structures around that practice to make sure it's perpetuated in an applied space. And these are all examples of like how we're trying to take what we've learned in these spaces and normalize them, make them structural in society, not just one-off events. That we can create the shift the system to begin to look like ancestral systems in terms of how we sustain ourselves, but also be forward thinking and seen as innovation at the same time. Oh God, sorry guys, I'm almost done. But I think some of the opportunities I want to leave there is like, the fluencies I see people who have a planning degree, and they were, at least I was able to do because of this, was to position my culture as innovation. To really understand the systems that were thrust upon us deeply in the history and how they're played out. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, as they say. Like, if you don't know the system you're beefing with, you're going to be subject to it your whole life. So that the first thing is to be disciplined to learn about the structures around us, how they're perpetuated, how to engage them, but how to then talk about our ancestry in the same breath. The second was an opportunity as planners now to restore island-derived methodologies to people practicing continental land use values on an island, on a hot island, with rising sea levels. How to be there meaningfully instead of just yelling or posting about it on Facebook. The third is how to normalize the notion of kinship over stewardship. We're not stewards of the land, we're related to land. And if we don't fundamentally believe that, and we can't show that through our policies, through our program design, through whatever, we're dead, literally. I mean, 2 or 3 generations from now, if we don't understand what it takes, how to reshape our thinking, we make way for the cockroaches, bro. And the last is how to kako or support practitioners to assume agency. How to use planning to flatten the plane, to not be a vertical power structure down on community, to make it horizontal. That community have agency and voice alongside policymakers, and they're respected and understood as vital roles relative to each other. And those are all things I really got from that the planning department helped me understand was intrinsically there and put words and practice and a piece of paper that allowed me to apply to things behind. And it was a really powerful type of experience. So I want to leave with I love this picture because this is Papa and Wakia, the sister of Earth Mother and Sky Father. But really, like, if you get, I feel sorry for people that are just literally believe in religion. They're fundamentalists, like it actually was 7 days. I think that's a powerful part of what you're missing is the deeper, beautiful metaphor of what the ancestors were trying to say. And then when you understood, if you believe that you're not just a random happenstance of a bunch of atoms that bumped together that created a life form that too pure, whatever, somehow decided to survive. I mean, that's great if that's what your spirituality is. But I think part of sentient beings that think of themselves as sentient, a realization that we have to understand our interrelatedness to each other. And we have to be able to bridge our ancestral stories. And when I say Maoli or an indigenous, I'm not talking about Hawaiian. I'm talking about all of us. All of us, as humans, up until like about a couple thousand years ago, are products of people that lived on an organic farm with family. That's the human condition. That's what allowed us to perpetuate ourselves and live within the context of our environment. And we start to rethink about our relationships to our ancestral stories and not be like, I'm going to talk about my ancestry, then I'm going to talk about innovation. Be more like, my ancestry is going to give me a space at the table. And how I talk about and how I deploy these principles in a new context is going to make my life perpetually meaningful, never boring, kind of scary in terms of like if you're having a mortgage on as a nonprofit, but also like you're creating a legacy that really replicates the legacy I was lucky to live in, where I had a family member that was doing it and left me to figure it out. And I think I want to put a period on that there because I do want to create space for if there are any questions about it, but also to a little bit of sharing about the planning department, because really explicitly, I really feel that the planning department has provided me all of these things, and that it's a great discipline that if you look at it intrinsically as just the planning classes, you're missing out. If you look at it as a vehicle to understand yourself, understand your own community, and what you want to do back in your community, and how do you learn the best way to do it, and learn best practices, and how do you engage in conversation. I think now, what I was sharing with Karen, I think the planning department really does is almost like the emotional intelligence of society. How do you have ethical discourse again? We need another like us versus them conversation that we freaking hold our collective heads. We need to find new ways to talk about things that help us bridge difference, to help us take our ego out of the conversation and put the service of collective community building back on the plate. And that can't only be held by people who work at the state or the private sector. Communities need to be more plannerly. Society needs to be more plannerly. And they need to be able to do it and need to have the skill sets to do it. And it's a muscle you have to develop. It's specific trainings you have to have. It's not as intuitive sometimes. So I really want to make a plug for it because it's been really beneficial to me. I really want to thank you guys for letting me talk at you for an hour.